Eddie Hearn did an interview recently with DAZN, and he said that PBC is looking for a Canelo 3-fight deal. PBC fires back regarding Canelo, said it doesn't have to be a 3-fight deal according to sources. They're interested in a Canelo fight. It could be a single fight deal as well. So direct contradiction to what Eddie Hearn has told the world. What up, fight world? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. I encourage you all, if you like the content, throw a like on this video. Those likes go a long way to notify others who are looking for great boxing content, the sweet science, and notify them that the video is fire. So I encourage you guys to hit the like button. This is your one-stop shop for all your boxing needs. I am your host, Boxing Ego, aka Ego. Now, let's get into today's topic. Eddie Hearn of Rematch Room, DAZN, he did an interview. I made a video about this. This is why you guys got to subscribe to the channel for the latest and greatest. In that, Eddie Hearn says they're basically at a crossroads with the Canelo fight. Long story short, Canelo is a free agent. He's working with Eddie Hearn, or has been working with Eddie Hearn. He's interested. His plan A is Caleb Plant for Undisputed, but they also don't want a long-term fight deal. In this interview, Eddie Hearn says that PBC is requesting that, or the offer made was a 3-fight deal for Canelo to fight future fighters and future fights on the network beyond Caleb Plant first fight, right? Now, that report from Eddie Hearn or interview has directly been countered. You see ESPN Deportes, I will put the link in the description, and this has been translated for you. Sources: PBC willing to negotiate a single fight with Canelo. Oh, it's getting chippy. So Eddie Hearn attempted to throw PBC, I guess you could call it, under the bus and just say that, hey, if this does, like, basically tell the world, if Canelo Undisputed, the fight he said he wants, doesn't happen, it's because they want a multi-fight deal. Now this report is directly rivaling that statement and notion. Everything is on the right track for Canelo to face Caleb Plant for super middleweight title. Says negotiations for Canelo Alvarez and Caleb Plant to face each other for the undisputed crown of super middleweight have already begun, and apparently there is already a first obstacle that they will have to overcome in the face of what is supposed to be the first bell September 18th in U.S. territory, blah, blah, blah. While Eddie Hearn has said that PBC, Premier Boxing Champions, intends to tie Canelo for 3 fights, including Plant, as a premise to gain access to the battle, sources on the PBC side have told ESPN Knockout that they are willing to negotiate a single fight for Canelo with the best pound for pound in the world, the long-awaited battle with Plant. So that's a direct and stark contrast to what Eddie Hearn said on the DAZN show. So let's get this straight. Eddie Hearn on the DAZN boxing show said that there's an obstacle and this may not happen, and we need to know and finish negotiations this week. Otherwise, Canelo is moving on. And he says in this interview that there are a couple other options that they already have that can be signed tomorrow if in fact the Canelo fight with Caleb Plant doesn't go through. So it looks like a backdoor, a scapegoat is already in play, a backup plan, if you will. Keep in mind, we also got information from reporters that stated that DAZN and DAZN leadership had reached out to qualify Gennady Golovkin. Hey, no, guys, hey, Max. Yeah, Mexican style ever. Right? To qualify Golovkin to see if he, in fact, would be a potential option for Canelo in a trilogy in September. Just to, you know, to probe. So let's get back to the article on ESPN Deportes. This week it has become known by Eddie Hearn that PBC was not willing to negotiate a single fight with Canelo, and they wanted to tie him for 2 more fights. Journalist Lance Pugmire revealed that DAZN would be exploring the possibility of reviving Canelo versus Triple G trilogy, which I just said, while sources within DAZN also said 175-pound champion Dimitri Bivol on the table. Gilberto Mendoza, president of the WBA, showed that in the case Caleb Plant is not Canelo's rival for September 18th, that he knew a possibility that Artur Beterbiev would be finally the rival for the Mexican star in the second half, right? PBC sources confirmed that they are willing to negotiate a single fight. Canelo with Plant, beyond the fact that they believe they have two good options like David Benavidez or Jamal Charlo, if he wanted to do a 3-fight deal, who have been mentioned repeatedly as possible enemies for Canelo. Eddie Reynoso and Canelo have reiterated that their priority for their third lawsuit, this is a translation, so not all of it, that's why I'm reading like this. Some of the words probably haven't been translated all, you know, it's just Google Translate. So some of the translation is being lost in translation. Says after beating Avni Yildirim, Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant to seek the historic unification for the legacy. Meanwhile, Canelo formally began his training this week with Eddie Reynoso, who's the coach, manager, and promoter. They have a fruitful alliance in the last 3 fights with Eddie Hearn, Matchroom, blah, blah, blah. In the coming days, news is expected in this regard, although it must be taken into account that there are a little more than 2 months for the meeting, in which case September 18th is the proposed date. Whatever, the protagonists of the negotiations are already moving their chips in the event that nothing can be accomplished for Canelo and Plant due to historic unification. So basically, it's a correction to Eddie Hearn's previous notion in previous video. Now, I've maintained that if Canelo Alvarez doesn't in fact fight Caleb Plant, this will be a bad look for Canelo Alvarez. Reason being, Canelo said for the second time in the second division, different division, that he wanted to be undisputed. He did it at middleweight and now super middleweight. So if you can't make good on your promises, then that's a L, that's a bad look. How is it so hard for Canelo to book these fights? See, this is the problem. They want Canelo to be the quote unquote Mexican Floyd Mayweather, but Mayweather never went through these problems. If Mayweather wanted to fight a B-side opponent, it always happened. If he said, I'm fighting Maidana, it happened. Guerrero, it happened. Canelo, it happened. Canelo, they say he's the face of boxing and #1 pound for pound, but he has a history since he's been with DAZN. He has a history of all of his fight negotiations are stalling out, fizzling out. They can't reach a compromise. They can't reach an agreement, etc., etc. So that's a bad look for Canelo. How are you the face of boxing? How are you #1 pound for pound, supposed to be the A side, the money man, the cash cow, and all of your fights keep having issues? So again, if Caleb Plant happens again, they were already supposed to fight, as I will show you. So let's take a little stroll down memory lane. Sports Illustrated. Canelo Alvarez postpones his September fight despite negotiations with Sergey Kovalev. Alvarez has fought in September each of the past 3 years. So Canelo claimed he wanted the Mexican dates. The initial, he ended up fighting Kovalev, but he was supposed to fight him in September. They later fought, I think, in November because all the negotiations fizzled out. And then there was not enough time to make the fight by September because it was like August and they still hadn't cleared the air. So Kovalev went on to fight Anthony Yarde, almost got stopped in that fight. And Canelo just sat out and then later fought Kovalev. So the Kovalev negotiations at first failed. Here's another one. Bleacher Report. Canelo Alvarez IBF title got stripped away after talks with Sergey Derevyanchenko stall out. Here's another one. That's a second one. Y'all keep up. So he was supposed to fight Derevyanchenko. He was the title holder. He was 1 belt away from undisputed. This is at 160. And then his team at the time, Golden Boy, was in negotiations with Sergey Derevyanchenko, the #1 mandatory, and it didn't happen. The fight didn't happen. Derevyanchenko went on to fight Triple G. I thought he should have won, but that's another story. But all I know is Canelo Alvarez was supposed to fight Derevyanchenko, and then he got stripped. IBF strips Canelo of his title because they couldn't get the deal done. So Kovalev, the first negotiations, Derevyanchenko negotiations, we could keep going. So this is after Canelo Alvarez left Golden Boy. He sued him, left Golden Boy. Caleb Plant hoped to face Canelo in December, but the deal didn't work out. So that was Caleb Plant for December. Now you're telling me there's another issue. Here's another issue. Issues between Canelo Alvarez and DAZN show issues continue to plague the business of boxing. They were arguing, DAZN and Canelo, saying Canelo wasn't fighting quote unquote premier opponents, and they weren't approving it. He wanted to fight Avni Yildirim, yada, 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 right? So this is just a bad look, really, for DAZN, because DAZN continues to have this problem. While PBC and others, mostly PBC, get to make announcements and just announce their fights, Pacquiao, Spence, whatever, DAZN is making announcements for negotiations, telling you Tyson Fury and Joshua are happening, then it doesn't happen. Then they say, oh, Caleb Plant, Canelo, this could happen. And then now if it doesn't happen, it's going to be bad. Then we're talking about Triple G fighting Jaime Munguia. Then there were reports that Triple G was in deep negotiations with Andre. Now they're saying that's not going to happen. So at the end of the day, it's about what you can produce. And if DAZN can't produce any of these fights, then that's a bad look. The other thing, and I'll get to this in more detail in another video, but Canelo, why won't he do a 1 or 3 fight deal with PBC when there's some great options for him? Caleb Plant, if it's a tough fight or if you lose, you could do a rematch. You can fight Jamal Charlo after that, David Benavidez after that. So they're great fights. But Canelo would rather fight Caleb Smith, Avni Yildirim, and Billy Joe Saunders on this European tour. So, you know, it's a bad look because we see the game that Canelo is playing. Drop your thoughts in the comment section. Use my link to get TubeBuddy. That's a great way if you're on YouTube as an uploader and creator to make money on this platform like yours truly. Use my link, set up TubeBuddy, order TubeBuddy right now. It'll take you to the next level. You got to be consistent with your content, but I've been using it for years. It can help you too. Let me know what you think of this Canelo news. Again, the PBC is saying that they're contradicting what Eddie Hearn said, for starters, and said they can do a 1-fight deal with Canelo. But Canelo, I told you this is going to be a problem because you seen the moment you seen DAZN and Canelo doing NFT packages, and the moment you seen Canelo in bed with Eddie Hearn, proverbially, and doing fights with Julio Cesar Martinez in Mexico, then it looked like Canelo wanted to work with Eddie Hearn, and he was on record saying Eddie Hearn's the best promoter and this, that, and the third. So at the end of the day, it looks like he likes getting overpaid by DAZN for fighting Eastern European, Turkish fighters. And you can't blame Golden Boy anymore. He's not with Golden Boy, and the moves are the same. So what does that tell you? Boom, the more you know. Peace. Are you tired of your YouTube videos not getting any views? Well, consider TubeBuddy. I've used TubeBuddy for years to scale up my YouTube channel. Now we're sitting over 200,000 subscribers. TubeBuddy is a browser extension that offers a ton of built-in productivity and time-saving services to take your channel to the next level. Use my link in the description to get started with TubeBuddy and level up your channel faster. We working.